Empire, the great Indian dynasty that had unified much of the subcontinent under Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. India fragmented. Different kingdoms rose and fell across the subcontinent. Foreign powers tens of millions of people. It was, by any measure, one of the largest and most powerful states on earth in the 4th and 5th centuries AD. But what made the Guptas truly extraordinary was not the size of their empire. It was what they did with the peace and prosperity that empire created. The Gupta period is routinely described by historians as the Golden Age of India. That phrase gets used so often that it can start to feel hollow. So let's be specific about what it actually means. It means that between roughly 320 and 550 AD, India produced an extraordinary concentration of intellectual, artistic, literary, and scientific achievement that has few parallels in human history. It means that during this period, Indian mathematicians developed the decimal number system, the system of counting using 10 symbols, including 0 that the entire modern world now uses. It means that Indian astronomers calculated the circumference of the Earth to within a fraction of the actual measurement 1,000 years before. Europeans accepted that the Earth was round. It means that Indian physicians developed sophisticated surgical techniques, cataloged hundreds of medicinal plants, and wrote medical encyclopedias that would influence Islamic and European medicine for centuries. It means that Indian poets and playwrights produced literary works of such sophistication and beauty that the great playwright Kalidasa, who wrote during this period, is still considered one of the greatest writers in any language in human history. It means that Indian sculptors created a visual language for depicting the Buddha that spread across Asia and forms the basis of Buddhist art in China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, and Tibet to this day. All of this happened in roughly 230 years. In one empire, on one subcontinent, the Gupta emperors were Hindu, and they governed a predominantly Hindu society. But their Hinduism was not exclusive or intolerant. Under the Guptas, Buddhism and Jainism flourished alongside Hinduism. Scholars of different traditions debated openly. Temples, monasteries, and universities received royal patronage, regardless of their religious affiliation. This intellectual pluralism was not accidental, it was policy. The Gupta court was famous for its Navaratnas, the 9 gems, a legendary group of 9 scholars. poets, mathematicians, and artists who gathered at the court of Chandragupta II. Whether this group was exactly as described by later tradition is debated by historians, but what is not debated is the broader pattern. The Gupta emperors actively sought out brilliant minds, funded their work, and created an environment where intellectual achievement was celebrated and rewarded. The greatest university in the ancient world, Nalanda, flourished during and after the Gupta period in Bihar, attracting students from China, Korea, Japan, Mongolia, Tibet, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia. At its peak, it had over 10,000 students and 2,000 teachers, with a library containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. It was in every meaningful sense the world's first great international university. Asterisk, asterisk. Let's talk about zero properly, because the story is more complex and more fascinating than most people realize. First, a distinction. There are actually two concepts of zero that needed to be invented separately, and both are remarkable. The first is zero as a placeholder, the idea of using a symbol to indicate an empty column in a number. This is what allows us to distinguish between 1, 10, 100, and 1,000. Several ancient civilizations developed this concept independently. The Babylonians had a version of it, and the Maya in Central America developed one completely independently. The second is zero as a number, the idea that zero is not just an absence but an actual quantity, that it can be added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided, that it obeys mathematical rules, and that it has profound philosophical implications about the nature of nothing. This second concept, zero as a number, was developed in India, and the Gupta period is where the intellectual groundwork was laid. The key figure is a mathematician and astronomer named Aryabhata, who was born in 476 AD, just as the Gupta Empire was beginning its decline, and whose work represents the culmination of the mathematical tradition. The Gupta period had nurtured Aryabhata's masterwork, the Aryabhasya, written when he was just 23 years old, is one of the most remarkable scientific documents in human history. In 121 verses he wrote in verse. Because mathematics was considered an art, he summarized and advanced the mathematical and astronomical knowledge of his time. The Aryabhasya contains the earliest known use of a place-value decimal system, the system where the position of a digit determines its value, and where zero functions as a number. It calculates pi to 4 decimal places, 3.1416. It describes the rotation of the Earth on its axis 1,000 years before Copernicus. It calculates the length of the solar year to within minutes of the actual value. A century and a half after Aryabhata, another Indian mathematician named Brahmagupta took the concept further. In his 628 AD work Brahmasphutastident, Brahmagupta did something no one had ever done before. He wrote down the rules for arithmetic with zero. He was defining the arithmetic of nothing. He was giving nothing a rigorous, usable mathematical identity, asterisk, asterisk, alongside zero. The Gupta period produced the other half of the mathematical revolution that defines modernity, the decimal place value number system. Think about Roman numerals for a moment. 7 means 5 plus 1 plus 1 equals 7. 14 means 10, 5 minus 1 equals 14. MCMXCIX means you have to work it out laboriously, Try multiplying MCM/XCIX by 47. It is nearly impossible without converting to a different system first. Now try multiplying 1999 by 47. You learned how to do this in primary school. The difference is not just convenience. It is a fundamental difference in the power of the system. The Indian decimal place value system, with its 10 symbols including 0, makes arithmetic vastly more powerful, more flexible, and more scalable than any previous number system. This system was developed in India during and around the Gupta period. It was transmitted to the Islamic world in the 8th century, where it was adopted, refined, and spread westward. When it reached Europe in the medieval period, it was called the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, the name it still carries today, acknowledging its dual heritage. But somewhere in that transmission, the original Indian source got lost in the Western imagination. Most people in Europe and America know these as Arabic numerals and have no idea that the system was invented in India 1,000 years before the Arabs transmitted it westward. Asterisk in the Aryabhatia, Aryabhata proposed something radical, that the Earth rotates on its own axis, and that this rotation, not the movement of the stars, is what causes the apparent daily motion of the sky. He wrote, "Just as a man in a boat moving forward sees the stationary objects as moving backward, so the stationary stars seen from the rotating Earth move toward the west." This is heliocentric intuition. This is Copernicus, 1,000 years early. He calculated the circumference of the Earth at 39,968 kilometers. The actual value is 40,075 kilometers. His error was less than 0.3%. He calculated the length of the sidereal year at 365 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 30 seconds. The modern value is 365 days, 6 hours, 9 minutes, and 10 seconds. His error was about 3 minutes and 20 seconds over an entire year. He explained solar and lunar eclipses correctly at a time when most of the world still attributed eclipses to supernatural causes. He did all of this without telescopes, without calculus, without computers, working by naked eye observation and pure mathematical reasoning in northeastern India in the 5th century AD. ****. The Gupta period's intellectual flowering was not limited to mathematics and astronomy. Indian medicine during this era reached heights that would not be surpassed anywhere in the world for centuries. The Sushruta Samhita is particularly astonishing. It describes over 300 surgical procedures and 120 surgical instruments. It includes techniques for cataract surgery, describes rhinoplasty, reconstructive surgery, to rebuild a damaged nose in such detail that the technique described is recognizable as the basis of modern rhinoplasty. It discusses caesarean section, bone setting, wound suturing, and the removal of foreign objects from the body. When British physicians in colonial India in the 18th century encountered traditional Indian rhinoplasty being practiced by local surgeons, they were so impressed that they published descriptions of the technique in the Gentleman's Magazine in 1794. This directly inspired the development of modern plastic surgery in Europe. Ancient Indian surgical knowledge, transmitted through 1,300 years of unbroken tradition, taught European doctors how to rebuild the human face. No account of the Gupta Golden Age is complete without its greatest literary figure, Kalidasa. Almost nothing is known about Kalidasa's life. We don't know exactly when he was born or died. We don't know his caste or his origins. We have only his works, and those works are extraordinary. His play Abhinana Sakunam, usually translated as The Recognition of Shakuntala, is considered one of the greatest dramatic works in any language. When the German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe first read it in 1791, in a Latin translation he was overwhelmed. Wouldst thou the young year's blossoms and the fruits of its decline, and all by which the soul is charmed, enraptured, feasted, fed? Wouldst thou the earth and heaven itself in one sole name combine? I name thee, O Sakuntala, and all at once is said. Goethe, one of the greatest writers in European history. The author of Faust said that a single name contained earth and heaven combined. He was talking about a play written in India 1,500 years earlier by a man whose biography we don't even know. One of the Gupta Empire's most lasting legacies was not what it kept, but what it gave away. As Buddhism spread from India across Asia during and after the Gupta period, it carried Indian culture with it. The visual language of Buddhist art, the specific way of depicting the Buddha, the iconographic conventions. The artistic vocabulary was developed during the Gupta period and spread with remarkable consistency across an enormous geographic area. The Ajanta caves in Maharashtra, whose extraordinary painted murals were created largely during the Gupta period, represent perhaps the finest surviving example of ancient Indian painting. Indian mathematical and astronomical knowledge traveled with merchants and scholars along the Silk Road into Central Asia and China. The kingdoms of Southeast Asia in modern-day Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam adopted Indian writing systems, Indian religious traditions, Indian artistic conventions, and Indian cosmological ideas. The Khmer Empire that built Angkor Wat was, in profound ways, a product of Indian cultural influence radiating outward from the Gupta world. When Arab scholars in Baghdad in the 8th century went looking for the best mathematical and astronomical knowledge available, they sent to India. The chain of transmission is direct and documented. Gupta India gives Islamic Golden Age, gives European Renaissance, gives modern science. The Gupta Empire is not a footnote to Western civilization. It is one of its deep roots, So what happened to the Guptas? The decline began in the late 5th century and unfolded over roughly 100 years. Like Axum, it was not a single dramatic collapse, but a slow erosion from multiple directions. The primary military threat came from the Huna, a nomadic Central Asian people related to or associated with the Huns, who were simultaneously devastating the Western Roman Empire. Beginning around 460 A.D., the Huna began raiding and then invading the northwestern frontiers of the Gupta Empire. The Gupta emperors fought back. Skandagupta, who came to power around 455 A.D., defeated the Huna in a major battle and temporarily stabilized the frontier, but the cost was enormous. The constant military campaigning drained the imperial treasury and weakened central authority. After Skandagupta's death, the empire fragmented into competing successor states. By 550 A.D., the empire that had unified northern India for over 2 centuries was effectively gone. The final blow to Nalanda came in 1193 AD, when the Turkish military commander, Bakhtiar Khilji, sacked and burned the university. By some accounts, the library burned for 3 months. Tens of thousands of manuscripts were destroyed. One of the greatest repositories of human knowledge ever assembled was reduced to ash. Several reasons compound each other. The transmission problem. When Indian mathematical knowledge reached Europe, it came via the Islamic world. European scholars credited their Arab teachers, not the Indian originators. The label Arabic numerals stuck, and the Gupta contribution was buried under a layer of intermediaries. The colonial curriculum. When Britain colonized India in the 18th and 19th centuries, the educational system it imposed was explicitly designed to replace Indian intellectual traditions with European ones. The British administrator Thomas Macaulay famously argued in 1835 that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. This was not just an opinion, it was policy. The absence of ruins, the Gupta Empire, built largely in wood and brick rather than stone. Unlike Rome, whose concrete and marble survived 2 millennia, or Egypt, whose stone monuments still dominate the landscape. The physical remains of Gupta civilization are sparse. Without dramatic ruins to photograph and display in museums, the empire becomes invisible to casual history. The Sanskrit barrier. The primary texts of Gupta civilization are written in Sanskrit, one of the most complex and demanding languages ever developed. For most of Western history, almost no European scholars could read them. The mathematical and scientific achievements contained in Sanskrit texts were simply inaccessible until the 18th and 19th centuries, by which time European science had developed independently and the Indian origins of key ideas had been forgotten or disputed. Go back to 0 for a moment, a number that took humanity thousands of years to invent. A number that required a specific culture, curious, pluralistic, philosophically willing to take nothing seriously as a concept to bring into existence. Without 0, there is no algebra. Without algebra, there is no calculus. Without calculus, there is no physics. Without physics, there are no engines, no electricity, no computers, no satellites, no modern medicine, no space travel. The entire edifice of modern technological civilization rests, at its mathematical foundation, on a concept developed in ancient India, in the intellectual hothouse of the Gupta Golden Age, by scholars whose names we mostly don't know, working in a language most of the world can't read, in an empire that Western education forgot to teach. The next time you look at a number, any number, written anywhere, remember where it came from. Remember the Gupta Empire. Remember that nothing, the concept of nothing, the number nothing, the mathematical nothing that makes everything else possible, was someone's greatest invention. And history almost forgot to tell you, the problem isn't the Gupta Empire disappeared. The problem is that we never taught it in the first place. This is what Forgotten Empires is about. Not just finding lost history, but asking why it was lost and what we miss when we ignore it. If you want to know what's next, subscribe. Next week, we're going to talk about the female pharaoh Egypt tried to erase from history. I'll see you there.